Welcome to the Bogosity podcast for the 27th of July, 2015, the podcast that remotely exploits Tonka trucks.
It's been a long time since I played with those.
I know, do they even make those anymore?
I think they do, but they're mostly found in the bargain bin at in the Walmart toy section.
This is your host, Shane Killian, and joining me again this week is Chris Hangartner. Chris, welcome back to the podcast.
Good to be back, Shane.
Let's exfoliate the news of the bogus. So 5 years ago, Dodd-Frank was enacted, which was supposed to save our economy, produce financial stability, end too big to fail, and I think some other stuff about puppies and rainbows too.
Yeah, like all government programs promise.
Yeah. So how well do you think it worked?
$50 says it failed miserably.
Yeah, pretty miserably. So we don't have this disappearance of the too big to fail institutions. In fact, it's been the exact opposite. The big banks are getting bigger, and the smaller banks and those little community and regional banks are going away.
It's like what Milton Friedman said, good intentions always have unintended consequences.
Yep. The financial system is less stable than it was. Of course, the economy is not doing really any better than it was.
Yeah.
Despite how they try to rig things like the unemployment rate to show improvement, but if you look at the actual labor force participation rate, it's pretty dismal.
Oh, yeah.
So, Dodd-Frank was actually based on a faulty assumption. What do they all blame for the financial crisis?
Not enough spending?
Well, deregulation is what they usually say.
Oh, yep.
Even though there was no deregulation, in fact, regulatory restrictions on financial services grew pretty much every year leading up to and through the...
Yeah, that's kind of reminds me of what people were saying during the Bush era, because like there was this one comic strip that I used to read called Ozzie and Millie, and the person who wrote it, she's a staunch, leftist and Democrat, and she criticized Bush as being a deregulator, and I'm just thinking, how? Did she look at George W. Bush's financial goals? Of course, most people say, yeah, but all of that went to the military. No, it went to the Department of Education, the economy plans, all that.
He expanded the Medicare prescription drug program, stuff like that.
Yep. What I hate about anti-Bush people, it's not that I support Bush because he was a bad president. It's just that people hate him for all the wrong reasons,
Yeah, pretty much.
I hate him because he was a warmongering economic interventionist, but everyone seems to hate him for being, pawn of big corporations, which he wasn't.
Well, if they hated him for what he really was, then they'd have to hate the Democrats too, because they do the same things.
Yeah, that's another funny thing. When I see people, say how the Democrats, are trying to end the Bush administration, I'm like, wow, because they sure didn't disagree on him when he first declared his war and all that.
Yeah. And people ask me how I predicted that Obama was a warmonger who would spy on Americans.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, like I said, the financial crisis wasn't because of deregulation. It was because of stupid regulations. And we've talked about this before. The affordable housing mandates that began in 1977 and are actually even continuing now into Obama's administration. And the whole idea of these is that poor people should be better able to afford homes. Well, the only way you do that is by loosening underwriting standards and by giving people homes they can't afford. Then, of course, you had the Federal Reserve pushing interest rates down to the floor and inflating the housing bubble. So they billed Dodd-Frank as, we're going to go after Wall Street and we're going to leave Main Street alone. It ended up being the exact opposite.
As always.
Yeah, the bulk of small business loans are from these small community financial institutions, local banks and credit unions, things like that. And this law just makes things like that so incredibly complex that none of them even really know how to do that. And we're losing, on average, one community bank or credit union a day because of this.
Oh, yeah. People always love to rant saying, oh, you're just sucking up to those big banks. And it's like, well, one of the reasons why people go to big banks is because the government's regulating the smaller ones out of there. Most people, from what I've heard, they get their money usually from that, from either smaller local banks or from, credit unions. But because of all these rules and regulations, it's almost impossible to maintain those.
Well, and the small businesses got absolutely thrashed.
Yeah,
by the outcome of the housing crisis. And they can't recover just because it's so difficult to get a small business loan now.
Yep. And not to mention, people like to say, but if we pass all these regulations, the evil corporations will go away. But evil corporations have money and they can absorb the cost. In fact, contrary to how a lot of, movies like to portray it, some of the biggest advocates, for tougher regulations are the bigger corporations. I mean, if I recall correctly, Obamacare was largely written by big medical insurance companies.
Oh, yeah. Now, there's a part of Dodd-Frank called the Durbin Amendment, and this came because people were whining like, oh, well, why should there have to be all these transaction fees when you use a debit card? So they put all these restrictions on this debit card fee. As a result, before Dodd-Frank, 75% of banks offered free checking. 2 years after it passed, that had gone down to 39%.
Oh.
And then you have the Volcker Rule, which bans proprietary trading by banks, and there's all sorts of other regulatory mandates involved that has really reduced liquidity for the markets of fixed income assets. One of the big ones being the corporate bond market, which is one of the big channels for capital formation in our economy. So there's less liquidity for the formation of capital, which means that you don't get new businesses forming, you don't get existing businesses expanding, and you don't get jobs created as a result.
Yeah, yep. The result is the inappropriate word hits the ventilation device.
Yeah. And it's even the case that it is so difficult to get this liquidity that if there's another panic, banks will be less likely to be able to deal with these shocks.
Oh, yeah.
So something else Dodd-Frank did was put these taxpayer-funded bailouts into law, and a lot has been written about the moral hazard of this, and a lot of it was just before the financial crisis, banks were engaging into this just because they figured that Congress would probably bail them out. Now they know they're going to get bailed out if they screwed up.
Yeah, and that takes away their incentive to not screw up.
Yeah. And the Fed's still keeping interest rates down, same old, same old.
People love to say low interest rates are good, but they only create bubbles,
Well, low interest rates are good if the market conditions are right for it.
Yeah.
But they need to be at that equilibrium between the amount of money that people have to put up for investments and the amount that people want.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. Interest rates should only be low only if the market conditions are good for it. If they're not, then unfortunately they gotta try to reach that equilibrium, so they gotta increase in an area.
It's like any other price cap.
Oh, yeah.
Something else Dodd-Frank did was create the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau.
Don't you just love those bureaucratic names?
And the director has the power to just declare any consumer credit product unfair or abusive and outlaw it with no oversight. It's not subject to congressional appropriations.
Yeah, that's totally not going to get abused.
Yeah. And Dodd-Frank also requires the courts to give deference to the Bureau when it interprets the law. So the courts don't really have that much control over it.
Again, totally not going to get abused. That's another problem with our government, is that we create all these bureaus and committees and we give them absolute power in their area.
It also requires that bank holding companies that have $50 billion or more have to submit a detailed plan for how the company will deal with severe financial problems, and if the regulators don't like it, they can require the company to restructure, raise capital, divest, or downsize.
That's going to make the problem worse, because the thing is, if a company's not doing well, because I did take some business education when I took a short gig at community college, a company going bankrupt is kind of like cancer. You need early detection and you need to react as quickly as possible. If I'm a CEO of a big company and I find out that my company is going down the tank, I'm going to call an emergency meeting. I'm going to sit down with the board of directors and say, okay, we need to figure out what's going on and we need to work on this quickly or else this company is going down. But if I have to waste time, filing it out with the government and then the government says, we don't like your plan, so you're going to have to do it again. By that time, my company could lose, a lot of money and go completely, under the water, and it's too late to do anything.
And it's not like regulators and bureaucrats have ever been timely in their responses.
Oh, yeah, they're slow.
Dodd-Frank also allows the Federal Reserve to declare which banks are systemically important and put them completely under government control.
Yeah, and there's people that say this is why the banks should be nationalized, even though we are kind of sort of doing that.
So they declared systemically important AIG and GE Capital, and so now Fed officials are de facto board members and involve themselves in decisions including like the hiring and firing and disciplining of employees.
Yeah, just
things that have nothing to do with how their financial systems
You know, it's funny because they passed this law to end lobbying and all that, but this is only going to encourage lobbying.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, like if I'm a CEO of a big bank and I don't want to lose my power over my market, I'm not going to say, no, I don't want to be nationalized by the state because I'm a greedy capitalist. I'm going to say, look, I don't know what it takes, but if you're going to nationalize a bank, at least, make me in charge and make my company the forefronter and all that. That's what I would do.
Say, if you're tired of the promos in this podcast, well, the patrons got it early and with no ads or promos. Just go to patreon.bogosity.tv and donate at any level. Hackers, terrorists, the NSA. But I repeat myself. Your online security is under attack, and the weakest point is your password. That's why you need LastPass. LastPass plugs into your browser and allows you to randomly generate strong, unique passwords anywhere on the web, all protected by one master password. LastPass sets up in minutes and gives you secure automatic logins throughout the web, synchronizing across all your browsers and all your computers, at home, at work, or on the road. It even securely stores sensitive form data, including credit card numbers, backup sensitive documents, membership info, Wi-Fi logins, and more. And with LastPass Premium, you can get these benefits on other applications and even mobile devices, and also get priority customer support. Sign up at password.bogosity.tv for a free month of LastPass Premium. Log in securely everywhere using the last password you'll ever have to remember. Go to password.bogosity.tv and get LastPass now. Well, isn't it great that we have these consumer credit bureaus, Equifax, TransUnion, and Experian? Yeah, I can't think of any problems that might come from having all of that personal information about us all in one place. So yeah, Experian is the target of a class action lawsuit that was just filed in California, alleging that they negligently violated consumer protection laws. And the reason why they're saying this is because for 10 months, they failed to realize that one of their customers of the data broker subsidiary was a scammer who had a criminal service that resold consumer data, our data, to identity thieves.
Wow.
And this is the case. A lot of people have heard about it. This Hu Ming Ngo guy. He's a Vietnamese man. He ran this big ID theft ring, superget.info and findget.me, and there's been a lot of stuff about it.
Not to sound racist, but every time we hear of a hacking scandal, it's so shockingly that a pretty good number of them are from Southeast Asia.
Well, it's just that that's kind of where the conditions are right for it. You've got enough poverty that it makes things like this attractive. You've got governments that are repressive enough that they can't do legitimate things like start their own businesses.
Oh yeah,
but
especially in China and all that.
Yeah, but they still have the technology to pull it off. So,
and it's funny because I remember there was one year where a bunch of Chinese students hacked into vital U.S. government organizations, and the government for a while thought that China was declaring a cyber war on the United States. But then, after thorough investigation, it was found out that these students acted completely independently, and that the real reason why they hacked into the U.S. system wasn't because they were skilled hackers trained by the Chinese government. It was because the U.S. military security was crap.
Yeah, it is pretty crappy. But I mean, that's the thing. It's like every time there's this big hack against Sony or against the OPH or any of the others that we've covered, everyone says, oh, this is some foreign government doing this to us because look at the scale of it. No, not necessarily. They don't have access to any tools that, John Q. Hacker out in the Philippines or the Seychelles or wherever doesn't.
And actually going back to hacking and all that, it's funny because I saw this really crappy movie, Terminator 3 Rise of the Machines. I hate that movie, by the way.
Oh, God.
It ruined the second movie. But what's the dumbest thing ever is that people say Skynet hacks into the world's nuclear arsenal and just launches them. And I'm like, it's virtually impossible to hack into nuclear missiles. One, because they have to be manually turned on. You can't just turn them on with a computer CAD.
Yeah, you have to physically turn a key, or two keys, actually.
Yep, and also, here's another thing. The computers that we used to launch the missiles, they're really old. They still use floppy disk, people.
And before then, it kind of worked because the idea was that Skynet built the robots and the robots did it, but that didn't happen in the third movie.
Yeah, that's another reason why I hate that movie. It just took a shit all over the second movie.
And the second movie was so great. I loved the second one.
Yeah, and it had a good message, but then the director came along and said, nope. Box office dollars demand that Judgment Day occur, so it's going to occur.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty funny. People like to view Hollywood as being like the big rebels who are going after big business, even though they're the biggest sellouts in the entire world.
So anyway, Ngo got access to something like 200 million consumer records for 10 months after Experian acquired his company, Court Ventures, and he continued paying for these data searches via cash wire transfers from a Singapore bank. He made nearly $2 million, and according to the Justice Department, the IRS has confirmed that 13,673 U.S. citizens, because of this stolen personal information from this guy's websites, have been victimized because of $65 million worth of fraudulent individual income tax returns as a direct result of this.
Oh, yeah. This actually reminds me of a story that one of my friends told me where, while he was in the army and stationed in Iraq, he was talking to a Canadian soldier of all places who told the story about how he became a victim of identity theft. And the thing is, he went to the Canadian government, and the Canadian government didn't do anything. The reason why the guy was caught was because he was going back. It was a guy from, I think it was the Philippines and all that, and he got the ID from his personal information, but the Philippine government investigated and found, yeah, this is a fraudulent account, and they alerted him. So that's how he learned. It's just bizarre like that.
So the lawsuit alleges that they violate all sorts of statutes, including the Fair Credit Reporting Act. They want the court to force Experian to notify all of the customers who are affected by Ngo's stealing of their identities that they might have their identity out there. Because, I mean, they're still out there. Anyone could buy them. Just because they got him doesn't mean the information's not still being traded around.
Oh, yeah. It's still out there. So
they want them to give people free credit monitoring service, to disgorge all of the profits they made from him, and to establish a fund where victims can apply for reimbursement of time and expenses incurred to correct any identity theft and fraud caused by customers of his service.
Yeah, with all this hacking, I mean, I remember seeing an interview with this one lady on the Stossel show, and she hated all the credit scams going on, that she and her husband made a vow that they are not going to ever use credit cards ever again. They use cash, strictly cash. Yep, and for big purchases, they use cashier checks.
But I mean, it's one thing to say, okay, you don't have to worry about Facebook because they don't have any information about you that you don't give them. And you don't even have to sign up for Facebook if you don't want to. Not so with these big three credit bureaus. You have no control over which and how much of your financial information they get. And it's not just things like credit cards. It's like every time you go to the doctor's office, every time you do all sorts of different transactions, all that goes into your credit report. And voice of experience here, even when there is a bogus entry in your credit report, it can be a bear trying to get it removed. And this is a huge problem, and just one more way that credit bureaus are not any help at all to consumers.
Yeah. And it's funny because I criticize some of these companies, and people are like, but you're an ANCAP. Aren't you supposed to love every big business? And I'm like, no. The difference between me and you is that I say that if a company does a dickish decision, they need to face their own medicine. Your idea is, let's expand the government, which I'm against.
Well, and how much would they even really be able to do if it weren't for all this big government control of the financial and credit markets?
Yeah, I've actually heard that, the government is responsible even when an independent, source gets hacked because of all this bureaucracy. It's a lot difficult to track these guys. When you have all this bureaucracy, it's much easier for a guy, to steal your personal information, take it off to the Philippines and whatnot. And it's difficult to track because there's so much regulatory that both you, the company, and the government have to go through before they can finally start investigating. Yeah, it's just crazy out there.
If you're on the Wi-Fi in a coffee shop or hotel, anyone on that network can get your traffic. Do you really trust all of those strangers? For that matter, do you really trust your ISP? A VPN can protect you from prying eyes, disguise your location, and even foil government censors. It's essential in this day and age, so go to vpn.bogosity.tv and you'll be taken to BoxPN. Starting at just $2.99 a month, you can get unlimited high-speed connections to VPN servers all over the world, and they don't log connections, so your privacy is assured. Traveling abroad, just VPN home, and don't worry about what those other governments are doing. Back at home, stop your ISP from traffic shaping and messing with the quality internet access you're paying good money for. You can connect from multiple machines at once, including your smartphone or tablet, and it supports all the secure standards, including OpenVPN and SSTP. Bypass censors and surveillance with your own secure VPN connection. Go to vpn.bogosity.tv. Meanwhile, over in the UK, something similar was happening in their school system, but their response was to go after the messenger. security researcher Zamis Clark, known online by the handle Slipstream. And what happened was he discovered a security flaw in software called Impero Education Pro, also known as IEP, which is widely used throughout UK schools, and it's used to both monitor and restrict internet activities for the students to make sure they don't go to any inappropriate sites or to find out what they're doing.
Yeah, it's funny. Even that rule has unintended consequences because, I understand what they're trying to do. They don't want us going on to porno websites, but often I found that it got in the way of research because it blocks certain research sites.
Oh yeah, we've covered that before. Well, what Slipstream found was there was a flaw in here that had the potential to expose the personal details of thousands of these students to the hackers. He announced the finding on Twitter and said it would allow for remote code execution on all Windows clients, and he posted a link to his proof of concept code. And what he said was he wasn't able to contact Impero directly because he's not a customer. Quote, "Not being a customer, I wouldn't have known where to send it or whether they'd even reply to me, and given the severity of the issue, I figured that full disclosure would cause some sort of fix pretty quickly."
Yeah, it just goes to show if a company is working for the government, they're usually not doing a good job.
Well, actually, they did fairly quickly issue a temporary security patch while they fixed the entire flaw, and they said that all of the school systems will have the new version with the flaw fixed in time for the school term. The problem is, according to Slipstream, the patch didn't really fix the problem. Quote, "Of course, their fix turned out to be inadequate. After speaking to Impero users on a forum who advised me to email Impero support, I did just that, reasonably disclosing to them exactly how their fix was inadequate and that I had an updated POC that worked against it." So what did they do? They sent him a legal threat.
Yeah.
They said, quote, "In breach of the license terms he never agreed to since he wasn't a customer, you have modified the software," no he hasn't, "without our client's authority, you have decompiled the software," no he didn't, "for purposes otherwise than to achieve interoperability, and you have published confidential information about our client's software." Do these people even understand how this stuff works?
No, they don't. But as you covered in previous podcasts before, it's not uncommon for that to happen. Is that a company that does stuff like this, you've got a major security flaw in your design, and just to show you, I rigged a simulator to show how it's vulnerable, and their response is, "We're going to sue you for copyright or licensing infringement."
Yeah, that's a bad sign when they do that.
Yeah, it means they don't care.
They also said, quote, "You have enabled anyone to breach the security of our client's software program and write destructive files to disrupt numerous software systems throughout the UK. No, you did that when you wrote the flawed software in the first place."
Yeah, look, I can understand, computers are a little bit complicated and sometimes security holes get in the way, but a good company, when their security holes are pointed out, would fix it. I mean, hell, Facebook, from what I heard, if you can find a security flaw in their system, they'll give you $100 if you can demonstrate to it or something, or I forgot.
Oh yeah, they have a bug bounty. I think Firefox has one too, others,
Yep.
Lots of them are starting to do that.
Yeah, but if a company is just being like this saying, "No, there's nothing wrong with our system. If you try to show us again, we're going to sue you," that just really makes me question what your morals are in your company.
Yeah. Well, and a lot of that is a response to things like Pwn to Own, which is an annual thing where hackers come in and demonstrate all these zero-day exploits that they found, and they win all sorts of money for doing it, which is a good thing because it encourages people to find these exploits and get them out and let the companies know about it, and lots of companies participate in that. But a lot of people are pointing out a problem, which is that they'll find the 0 days like a few months earlier and then just sit on them until Pwn to Own.
Yeah, it's like...
So they can come and demonstrate it. So they're starting to do all these bug bounties to try and say, okay, we'll go ahead and give you money right now if you'll let us know about this.
Yeah.
So that's a good thing.
Yeah.
So Impero's lawyers say that Slipstream caused direct loss and damage, reputational damage, and potential damage to all of their systems.
No, he didn't. That was you.
Yeah. All he's doing is pointing out that the damage is there.
Yeah.
See, like it's like this building, and it has this one support pole that's rotted through and about to fall down. And he points out and says, "Look at that support pole. It's rotted through and about to fall down. You're compromising the security of this building." No, I'm pointing out that...
Some people are just stupid like that.
Yeah. Quote, The loss and damage to our clients caused by your activities is significant and will, in any legal action taken in the civil courts, be the subject of applications to the courts for restraining orders to restrict you from further copyright infringement and breach of confidence, as well as court orders for monetary compensation. So you're not allowed to find security flaws in our software anymore.
Good luck with that, then.
Yeah.
Something tells me that if some students' compromise do get hacked into and, it causes a problem, they're probably going to say, well, if this guy didn't publicize the information, the hacker wouldn't have known about it.
No, they would have known. If he can find it, others can find it too.
I know, but some companies say that.
Yeah, no, that's BS.
Yeah.
So, of course, Slipstream had a response. He said, quote, legal threats here would just be shooting the messenger, so to speak, and would discourage security researchers from actively reporting any issues. Such legal threats to security researchers would certainly not prevent any malicious individuals from finding issues themselves and using them for malicious purposes. In other words, you're only stopping the good guys.
Yeah.
And Slipstream actually says he knows someone who has found 2 other security issues in Emperor's software, but he might not be so willing to come forward about it now that Slipstream's getting sued.
Oh, yeah.
So this is not good.
Yeah.
And this is what all of these school children in the UK are forced to use. They don't get a choice.
Yeah.
So again, it's not like Facebook where we can just, I just won't use that software. No.
It just makes me facepalm at all this with schools and all that, just how incompetent they are. I mean, I thought American schools were bad, but this is happening in a European country,
Oh, we've covered all sorts of Bogosity in schools in other countries.
Yeah. No offense to any European viewers, but I just laugh when people say, oh, Europeans are smart, happy, and healthy. No, they're not. Well, not all of them, just there's a lot of BS about Europe.
History is written by the winners, and so apparently is economics. That's why there's LibertyClassroom.com. Probably the best single learning resource for history and economics on the web, LibertyClassroom.com teaches U.S. history, Western Civ, and economics from actual university professors. There's lots of free material to get you started, including introductory lectures on all these subjects, and when you sign up, you get the full site's content for just $99 a year, less than the price of 2 cups of coffee a month. And if you type in the promo code Bogosity in all caps, you'll get your first year for just $88. Lectures are available in both video and audio format, so you can watch or listen to them on your computer, your phone or tablet, or in your car. Learn at your own pace about the subjects you're interested in and become a more effective debater. You'll also get access to lots of supplemental materials and even the professors themselves via the discussion forum and even live video chats. Inform yourself against the myths and propaganda of our society. Visit LibertyClassroom.com. Okay, for this one I have to start with a bit of background information. The Wassenaar arrangement on export controls for conventional arms and dual-use goods and technologies is, as its name implies, an export control treaty which currently has 41 signatories. The idea is to make it more transparent which countries are trading arms with each other and how much, and it includes things like non-proliferation policies and, this is the relevant part here, export controls, and in particular, we're worried about Part 2 of Category 5, which is information security. So we've talked before about the problems we're still experiencing from our government putting export controls on strong encryption in the mid-90s. Well, it looks like the Wassenaar arrangement might do the same with cybersecurity across the board. As Errata Security's Robert Graham explains, quote, I created the first intrusion prevention system as well as many tools and much cybersecurity research over the last 20 years. I would not have done so had these rules been in place. The cost and dangers would have been too high. If you do not roll back the existing language, I will be forced to do something else.
Yeah, that's the funny thing, is that these regulations are supposed to make the market safer, but all they do is end up stifling out new business owners unless the business owner kisses the government's ring.
Well, and it's also impossible to figure out what they mean. Quote,
oh yeah.
The cybersecurity industry still hasn't figured out precisely what your rules mean. The language is so open-ended that it appears to control everything. My latest project is a simple DNS server, a piece of software wholly unrelated to cybersecurity. Yet, since hackers exploit DNS for malware command and control, it appears to be covered by your rules. It's specifically designed for both the distribution and control of malware. This isn't my intent, it's just a consequence of how DNS works. I haven't decided whether to make this tool open source yet, so therefore, traveling to foreign countries with the code on my laptop appears to be a felony violation of export controls.
Oh yeah, it's kind of like how the government bans a product simply because it could be used as something, even though it's not intended to be used as that.
Yeah. Well, and as he points out, they don't even intend for this to cover things like DNS servers, but they've written the rules so vague that it's impossible for anyone to know exactly what it covers. Quote, as we've seen with other vague laws, such as the CFAA, and the CFAA is the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act, and what he's going to talk about here in a second is something that happened with it a few years ago. So what happened was, there was this guy, Aaron Swartz at MIT. He downloaded files from JSTOR that he had access to, and he just decided he was going to download a whole bunch of them at one time, apparently so he could just read them offline. And they got him under the CFAA, and they made his life such a living hell that he ended up killing himself. And as Robert Graham says, quote, enforcement is arbitrary and discriminatory. None of us would have believed that downloading files published on a public website would be illegal until a member of community was convicted under the CFAA for doing it. None of us wants to be a similar test case for export controls. The current BIS rules are so open-ended that they would have a powerful chilling effect on our industry. The solution isn't to clarify the rules, but to roll them back. You can't clarify the difference between good and bad software because there is no difference between offensive and defensive tools, just the people who use them. The best way to secure your network is to attack it yourself. For example, my mass scan tool quickly scans large networks for vulnerabilities like Heartbleed, and we talked about that a few months ago as well. Defenders use it to quickly find vulnerable systems to patch them, but hackers also use my tool to find vulnerable systems to hack them. There is no solution that stops bad governments from buying intrusion or surveillance software that doesn't also stop their victims from buying software to protect themselves. And this is something else we've talked about before. It's math. No matter what your software is, it's math. Even if you're playing a game, watching a video, whatever, it's math. Math works the same for everybody. You cannot pass laws stopping hackers from doing these things to hack into systems without also stopping the security experts from doing things to try and secure their own systems. There's no difference.
Yeah, all this war with hacking kind of reminds me about the war with guns, like how they're trying to end gun crimes, but all they end up doing is just hurting the gun owners that have never committed a crime in their life.
Yeah. Only criminals will have guns, and only criminals will have these hacking tools.
Yeah, it's just like that. If we pass all these anti-hacking laws, don't get me wrong, hacking is a terrible thing, and I have no respect for people who hack, for profit or...
But hacking is a terrible thing when it's used for terrible things. Hacking is a good thing when it's doing things to secure your own network.
But all the government's doing is just getting rid of them because by the laws they pass, they're technically hacking and need to stop. And because they're good people, they're going to be forced to comply with the law. Whereas the people like LulzSec, they don't care. They disobey the law already. They're not going to care.
So Graham continues, quote, export controls on offensive software means export controls on defensive software. Export controls means the Sudanese and Ethiopian people can no longer defend themselves from their own governments.
Wow.
Wassenaar was intended to stop proliferation and destabilization, yet intrusion and surveillance software is neither of those. Human rights activists have hijacked this arrangement for their own purposes. This is a good purpose, of course, since these regimes are evil. It's just that Wassenaar is the wrong way to do this, with a disproportionate impact on legitimate industry, while at the same time hurting the very people it's designed to help. Likewise, your own interpretation of Wassenaar seems to have been hijacked by the intelligence community in the United States for their own purposes to control 0 days. And we talked about that last week, how governments want to get their hands on 0-day exploits so that they can exploit it themselves and leaving us all vulnerable in the process.
Oh, wow.
He concludes, quote, you must do the opposite and create the narrowest of interpretations. Better yet, you need to go back and renegotiate the rules with the other Wassenaar members, as software is not a legitimate target of Wassenaar control. Computer code is not a weapon. If you make it one, then you'll destroy America's standing in the world. On a personal note, if you don't drastically narrow this, my research and development will change. Either I will stay in this country and do something else, or I will move out of this country despite being a fervent patriot.
Yep, that's what happens to people. I mean, it's like, there are some innovators, who have unfortunately left the country because they can't handle the United States government laws all the time. I think one of the co-founders of Facebook did that.
Yeah, and that happened with a couple of the guys behind Linux after the DMCA was passed. They left to go to other countries because they were afraid that just by working on Linux, they might be targets.
Yeah, that's what happens. I mean, the government's always complaining, why the hell are all these jobs going to Europe or Australia and all that? And it's like, well, because you're making it hard to do business in America.
Yeah, that's exactly it. But of course, they blame the business. Oh, they're just greedy and they want more profits.
Well, yeah, I mean, again, as you pointed out, one of the reasons why a lot of companies, move their factories to South America or China is not because they're exploiters. It's just because it's very difficult to expand in America. They'll still keep their American factories here and there if they're profitable, but that's why they shut it down, because if you raise all these costs on them, they're going to say, okay, we need to shut down the factories that aren't making a profit here in America, and we got to move them somewhere else, so we can keep up with the production. Again, more unintended consequences, people.
Now you can make Amazon purchases with Bitcoin by going to purse.bogosity.tv. That's P-U-R-S-E. Moreover, most purchases can be made at a discount. Save an average of 20% just by buying from Purse, or get even greater discounts by linking your Amazon wish list. Go to purse.bogosity.tv. Bogosity.tv is a participant in the Amazon Services LLC Associates Program, an affiliate advertising program designed to provide a means for sites to earn advertising fees by advertising and linking to Amazon.com. Just clear your cookies and go to amazon.bogosity.tv, or check the right-hand side of the podcast page for Amazon's best deals, including the deal of the day and limited-time lightning deals on all sorts of great products. So next time you buy online, go to amazon.bogosity.tv. Now let's irradiate this week's biggest Bogon emitter.
Oh, I'm ready for this one.
And this week it goes to the University of Toronto, and you just won't believe this. They have a class that's come under fire, and the university has defended it. In this class, they teach that vaccines are unsafe. Also, homeopathy works because quantum mechanics. Also, potato.
Oh, the quantum mechanics straw man. I've seen it before.
They also teach, get this, that cancer is good.
Yeah, try telling that to a person that has stage 4 cancer and is hooked up to a bunch of machines. I'm pretty sure they'll pat you on the back for saying that.
Yeah, I lost my stepfather to cancer, so yeah, screw them.
Yeah.
So this is over the last 2 years. They've had a course called Alternative Health Practice and Theory. Doesn't the name itself just fill you with confidence?
Yeah. Like, I'm not against alternative medicine, but there has to be scientific backing to it.
You know what they call alternative medicine with scientific backing showing that it works?
What?
Medicine.
Yeah,
If you can prove it works, it's medicine. That's it.
Yeah.
There's no categorical, anything to eliminate any sort of thing. If you can prove it works, it's medicine.
Yeah, because as we discussed plenty of times, there needs to be some medical science backing up your claim. You can't just say, oh, did you know that if you touch your hair 5 times a day, you won't get cancer without scientific tests? Okay, show us that by touching your hair 5 times a day stops cancer. You got to show that to us. You can't just say, oh, it doesn't work that way. It's homeopathy.
And the lecturer is a homeopath named Beth Landau, who is also an anti-vaxxer.
And it's also funny how the left likes to accuse the right of being science, but most of the anti-vaxxers I see tend to be left-wing status.
Oh, it's absolutely a left-wing thing. Yeah. So the week that's really come under fire is week 9, which is called Vaccination, the King of Controversy. Gee, does this remind you of anyone else who wants to teach the controversy?
Kind of reminds you of the creationists. Yep, I'm pretty sure they're pulling the same argument. They're saying, no, we don't want to say we should stop teaching people about vaccines. We just want them to teach the controversy in the alternative ways.
So she has a reading list and a curriculum which teaches things like vaccines cause autism, which we know that they don't.
Yeah, they're still using that Lancet paper, which even the Lancet itself has said, we're sorry, people. We got the sources from a bad source. We're sorry.
And all of the other authors, other than the lead author, went back on it. The lead author had his medical license revoked because of outright fraud and child abuse committed during the testing.
Yeah, I remember seeing an interview with him, and he was laughing about how he conducted these rather very inhumane experiments on that, where he literally drew blood from children, right in front of them. And according to an interview with him, it actually disgusted the kids.
Yeah, I think I saw that. He was laughing about how the kids were crying about it.
Yeah, they were crying, they were fainting, they were getting sick at the sight of it, and he was laughing at it. Not to pull Godwin's Law or anything, but that sounds like something Dr. Mengele would do.
Yeah, so Landau also says in this course that measles and chickenpox are great for child development. I guess it's not that great for the ones who die from it.
Yeah, she's obviously never heard of shingles or the fact that measles will compromise your immune system if left untreated.
Yeah, for life.
Yep.
And did she teach the controversy? No, there is no reading from pro-vaccine or science-based sources.
Yep.
Anything that draws on peer-reviewed research or on epigenics and beneficial bacteria.
Yep.
And nothing else.
Yeah.
She also teaches that quantum physics, quote, offers clear explanations as to why homeopathic remedies with seemingly no chemical trace of the original substance are able to resolve chronic diseases. Because quantum mechanics is magic and can do anything.
Yeah, I hate it when people pull the whole quantum mechanics card, because here's the thing. Even the scientists pushing the movement still don't 100% know how quantum mechanics work and all that, And yet we have all these people applying, saying, oh, the universe is going to die, or this is going to happen, or that's going to happen because of quantum mechanics. And it's like, we barely know what quantum mechanics are. And we do know that while they do have some significant effects, they only affect at a very small microscopic level. I mean, submicroscopic.
Yeah, and all it does is take the legitimate research into applications of quantum mechanics and kind of discredit it before it starts. Like the major chip manufacturers, Intel and AMD, are including random number generators that should theoretically be true random number generators because they utilize quantum tunneling to generate the randomness, because you don't know at any given time whether or not an electron is going to be bridging that gap or not.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there's all these applications for it, but...
Yeah, I see people using quantum mechanics to advocate many, hypothetical ideas like the heat death of the universe or alternative reality and all that, even though all of those things are just theories, and we're not talking about scientific theories, we're just talking about theories that haven't been tested yet.
Well, Many Worlds is actually pretty scientific. It doesn't really make any more assumptions than the Copenhagen interpretation, which is the scientific consensus. And it's interesting that one of the things that Many Worlds theory does do is take this whole waveform collapse theory of the Copenhagen interpretation, which doesn't have any evidence for it, doesn't have any mechanism for why it should work that way, and just completely removes it. So there are fewer things that you need to explain with Many Worlds. So
yeah, it's funny about the Copenhagen experiment, because you've heard of Schrodinger's cat, right?
Right.
That was actually made to criticize the Copenhagen experiment because, I'm not saying, we shouldn't study quantum mechanics, but from what I've heard, the Copenhagen experiment wasn't conducted very properly.
Well, it's not an experiment. It's just a way of trying to do a mathematical formulation of things like the double slit experiment and explain why it does what it does. But I mean, you've got weird things like in the double slit experiment, even if you wait until after the electron or the photon or whatever it is you're measuring passes through the two slits to observe it, even if you wait until then, it will still only appear to have gone through one of the slits, as opposed to going through both when it's unobserved. So now, not only do you have this waveform collapse thing that you have to explain, but you also have to explain how it travels backwards in time. But Many Worlds fixes all of that.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's all theoretical, but there's things like Occam's razor that say, okay, you need to try and at least favor the one that causes the fewest problems of those. So anyway, getting back to the story, there's also a paper in the required reading called Cancer is Not a Disease, It's a Survival Mechanism. And of course, there's absolutely no information from any actual oncologists. They just claim that somehow cancer keeps people alive when they have underlying sicknesses.
Yeah, because when your cells get diseased and they don't work and then they start multiplying like mad, that's totally a good sign. I mean, that's what cancer is, people,
So there's all this crap in there. There's all this just horrific stuff. There was this big inquiry because of all of the complaints about it. And the university said that the course was fine. Quote, The instructor's approach in the class towards the issue of immunization in particular had not been unbalanced. Even though there was absolutely no information from the pro-vaccine side, it wasn't unbalanced.
And this is bad because not only is it distorting facts and all that, I feel really sorry for those students, who take that course, because if they do take that course and graduate and try to become doctors, good luck finding work now.
Well, and also they reported that there were no student complaints when the campus student newspaper tells a different story.
Yeah.
A lot of them are complaining about this.
Yep. And I thought American colleges were so stupid, but it just amazes me what these universities will teach nowadays. I mean, it was already ridiculous, when a lot of colleges, introduced women's studies, pornography studies, and all that. If you're going to go to college, learn something that's practical and useful.
Yeah. Well, it's just human nature, and it's probably not insignificant that Landau's husband is Dr. Rick Halpern, who is the dean of the University Scarborough campus.
Ooh, I smell corruption.
Mm-hmm. But it's not just this. Apparently, there are other courses in there, and comparing vaccines to the Holocaust and recycling all of these conspiracy theories about Big Pharma and everything that have been completely disproven.
Oh, great. Yeah.
Okay, so rogue teachers happen. You can't blame a university for not being perfect, but you can blame them when they refuse to do anything about it and even defend the course.
That's what I hate about both American and nowadays Canadian universities, because it's like that. Look, if you have a bad teacher, that's fine. I understand, there's going to be some quacks that slip through the cracks, but what a responsible university should be doing is like, oh my God, this medical teacher we have, is teaching our kids, that acupuncture cures AIDS and that cancer is good. Oh my, we need to get rid of her immediately and shut down her course. Nope, they say, nope, we are going to keep her. If you have a quack, you need to get rid of the quack. Oh, Canada, I don't mean to offend you, but you just gave us Americans another reason to make fun of you.
And it's for that reason that the University of Toronto is named this week's biggest Bogon emitter.
Hi, I'm Dave. You may recognize me from previous Bogosity episodes. However, I'm not here to talk about that. I'm also part of a podcast, the Superplex Brothers Podcast. Head on over to superplexbros.com. You can check out the podcast for video games and pro wrestling. We also have news, reviews, and editorials and all kinds of stuff just to talk about video games and pro wrestling and everything else that comes in between. So if you're into that, why don't you come check us out?
And now let's trim the fat from this week's Idiot Extraordinaire. And this week it comes from our stupid taxpayer subsidies department, awarding this dishonor to the National Institutes of Health for spending $3.5 million to find out, I'm not kidding, why lesbians are obese.
You know what this reminds me of? This reminds me of this one thing I studied while I was reading about wasteful government spending, how the U.S. government once went to South America and they wanted to know, why did Brazilian male prostitutes engage in dangerous sexual behaviors when they were drunk?
Yeah.
It's like, I can give you the answer for free. They're drunk. Yeah. It's like, what's the significance to this, people?
Yeah, so this started about 5 years ago because this issue is, of course, quote, high public health significance. It has a project end date and budget end date of June 30th, 2016, so they're not done yet. This summer, they received a grant of over $650,000, making the total funding for the research over $3.5 million, and that's more than double what was first projected for the study. I know, big surprise.
Your taxpayers' dollars going to good public use. Mm-hmm. That's another thing I laugh at when people say, well, why are you against taxes? It goes to public use and all that. Yeah, some of it, but the rest of it goes to bogus like this.
Well, and it's funny because I'm including an earlier report from CNS News who is talking about, oh, this is in trouble because of the sequester and they're cutting everything. You remember the sequester, right?
Yeah, I remember the news was going all over it.
This was not affected by the sequester, even though we cut spending to the bone. There's nothing else
Yeah.
we can cut.
So you can't cut, Medicare and all that, but you have plenty of money to fund, why lesbians, are fat.
Oh, but you can't keep the parks open to the point where you actually have to pay someone to put those little orange traffic cones in front of drop off where the,
yeah.
anyway.
Yeah, because of the sequester, we don't have the money to fund the public parks, so we're going to hire a bunch of people to guard the area so no one gets in it.
I mean, we covered that. That was just like a look off where you could just pull over, park, and look at the scenery, and they put traffic cones in front of it.
I've actually heard that during the sequester, the government deliberately did that, and that was just so people who were criticizing them would shut up and try to make them look like bad guys.
Yeah, they were trying to make it as visible as possible.
Yeah, same thing with the government shutdown and all that. Everyone said, oh my god, the U.S. government shut down. And even though the rest of the world was completely harmed, the government hyped it up saying, oh my god, if we don't do something now, the United States is going to collapse and we're all going to fall into chaos and anarchy. And even though none of that happened.
So this study has given us lots of wonderful conclusions, such as lesbians have lower athletic self-esteem, and this leads to higher rates of obesity.
And I know the perfect scientific explanation why. Duh! If you're bullied a lot, because sadly a lot of homosexuals are still bullied these times of day, that's going to happen to you,
But it's interesting they're not finding the same thing with gay men. Gay men tend to have fewer obesity problems than straight men.
Then again, it's just weird, it's just... Some of those statistics you got to be careful of because, as you pointed out plenty of times in your videos, causation does not always equal causation.
Correlation does not mean causation.
Correlation, yeah.
Yeah, well, and it's like you've got these 4 statistics, and it would actually be the unusual thing just because of the nature of statistics. If they were equal, you're bound to have, however you pair them up, you're going to look at pairs, and one's going to be bigger than the other.
And again, it doesn't really mean anything because the truth is that... Yeah, they're lesbians and they're getting fat, but there's other factors that go into, obesity than lesbianism and all that.
They also said that they should be screening young men to see if they are preoccupied with their biceps. What that has to do with anything, I have no idea.
I don't know. But I mean, hey, this is a government that once spent $10,000 to try to create this nutritional educational program for India, and even they admitted they had no idea what they were talking about. But they proved it anyway.
So it said, quote, both heterosexual and sexual minority males, so I guess all males, are at risk for presenting body image concerns and weight and shape-related behaviors that may have deleterious health consequences. Results suggest the need for screening for concerns and behaviors related to leanness and muscularity in early adolescence among males, regardless of sexual orientation.
Again, duh. We've kind of known about this problem for a while now. Take Basic Psychology 101. We talk about this, I want
to know why the lesbian community isn't taking huge offense at this.
Yeah, I know. It's
because imagine if they said, oh, we're going to do a study to figure out why black people are all fat and lazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But then again, the sad truth is that a lot of LGBT movements are federal status, and they'll easily criticize those racist state laws, which are bad, but if the federal government does something, they will not touch it. Unless, of course, it's an evil, conservative right-wing Republican, but that's for another story.
So that makes the NIH this week's Idiot Extraordinaire. Well, that wraps up this We Have the Supreme Pizzas edition of the Bogosity podcast. As always, you can come to forum.bogosity.tv to read the show notes and join the discussion. This podcast depends on you to keep going, so please donate using the links on the website or at patreon.bogosity.tv, and feel free to join in by sending a question, statement, news article, or rant to podcast@bogosity.tv. You can even stick it in an audio file if you want. Thank you for listening, and thanks again to Chris Hangartner for joining me.
Good to be back, Shane. Good to be back.
Until next time, here's a quote from Ralph Waldo Emerson. Of all debts, men are least willing to pay the taxes. What a satire this is on government. Everywhere they think they get their money's worth, except for these. The Bogosity podcast is licensed under Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial No Derivatives 3.0 Imported License. Bogosity. Do you want answers to creationist claims against evolution? Would you like to know more about evolution yourself, or even engage creationists more directly, with actual peer-reviewed sources to back you up? My book, How Evolution is Scientific, is designed to show the basics of evolutionary theory and how it is so well supported using the scientific method. It's impeccably sourced, with references to the actual scientific material, and is arranged using the creationists' own criteria of what is scientific. Using their own arguments against them, see how evolution is scientific, but creationism is not. Based on observations, accurate predictions, logic, and evidence. Get answers to common creationist claims, and even a primer on abiogenesis, the start of all life. It's all in my book, How Evolution is Scientific, available at Amazon and on Kindle, EPUB, and PDF as well. Get How Evolution is Scientific and never be taken in by creationists again.
Did you know that the government once spent $500,000 studying shrimp on treadmills?
Oh, yeah, I heard about that one, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, there's quite a few sites like
They
that.
also spent money on a robot that folds clothes. Yeah, and people are like, but the Japanese did something like that. Yeah, but here's the thing. It was made by a private company, and they were using their own money.
Yeah, they don't get that difference for some reason.
Yeah, if a private company does it, it's okay because it's their own money on the line. If their idea turns out to be a flaw and it bankrupts them, only they're going to get affected.
Right.
Again, that's the thing with taxes. You know, people like to say, why are you against taxes? It goes to public goods. It's like, if you study what the government spends your money on, you'll be demanding that we don't pay taxes.
Yeah.
Oh, and you know what's the dumbest argument I ever heard against libertarianism? I don't know if you may want to discuss this later, is that one person compared the libertarian ideology to the Articles of Confederation and claimed that caused America to almost be destroyed.
Well, it wasn't the Articles of Confederation. It was the fact that the state governments were printing out money like crazy.
Yeah.
And what people were wanting when they said, hey, we need to fix this, was they were wanting similar restrictions to be put on the states, but instead of restricting the state governments, they ended up giving more power to the federal government.
It's sad how people twist history around for their own petty beliefs.
Oh, yeah. It's a religion.
Yep.
That's all it is.
It's funny because I saw this really, really embarrassing video. It was this picture written by this guy called Marx, and this guy had about this guy who was praising Karl Marx, and he had the balls to claim that the Austrian School of Economics, supports dictatorships.
Wow.
I know what they're doing. They're pulling the Pinochet card. Okay, first of all, the Austrian school never encouraged Pinochet. And second of all, it was only based on one comment Friedrich Hayek made about Pinochet that was taken out of context. Hayek wasn't saying, oh, yeah, I love Pinochet. He's my homeboy. He was simply stating, well, I don't agree with everything Pinochet is. I am glad that he got some of the more radical parties that were really hampering Chile out of Chile. And another thing that often gets taken out of context is Milton Friedman's Miracle of Chile, where people say, oh, Milton Friedman said that dictatorships can bring democracy. No, what he said was that free markets, not only would they improve a country, but also if the country's under a dictatorship, it'll improve the economy. And you know what? He was right on that, because you want to know how Pinochet left power? He wasn't removed by left-wing revolutionaries. He voluntarily stepped down. Yeah, he's one of the few dictators to do so.
Yep, that's the piece of the market.
Oh, yeah, and another dumb thing is I once met a socialist, who claimed that America would be a better place if we had someone like Joseph Tito in charge, the guy in charge of Yugoslavia.
Yeah,
and it's funny because he's like, oh, but Yugoslavia was peaceful under Pinochet, and the Serbians and the Croats, weren't fighting each other. Yeah, because they were all in prison.
Yeah,
they were all in prison,
and the ones who weren't imprisoned were, under this police state.
Yeah.
That was really inhibiting everyone.
Yeah.